So we're at day 59 of the Vendée Globe, and in the South Atlantic, it's proving to be a really interesting fight between 4th and 10th place at the moment. We can see that the two groups, we've got Boris, Sam, and Chiral, as well as Thomas over towards the west over here, and Nico and Paul Mayhat have pushed out towards the east to try and get a nice shift to head towards the north. But they've got more than 400 miles separation. At the moment, it looks like the boats towards the west, they really managed to get a really nice angle through the South Atlantic convergence zone over here. They had to fight through all that lightning and all the tricky, shifty light wind conditions, and they've managed to do that. And it looks like the zone was slightly narrower, so they were able to get into more consistent breeze compared to the boats over in the east, who had to fight through lighter winds for longer. So we can have a look at the synoptic chart, and we can see that they're both nice and clearly ahead of that convergence zone, and they're now working their way in the trade winds around the South Atlantic high pressure, St. Helena high pressure, and they're working their way towards the corner of Brazil over here. You can also see on the satellite pictures how that convergence zone here brought that strong activity and instability, which is why they had those light winds, and it was probably not quite predictable what they were sailing compared to the forecast. We can also see that over here in the east, there's an extension in this cloud line which isn't really shown as any sort of front or any sort of feature on the synoptic charts, but we can see Nico and Paul are just either side of it, so maybe this will be marking or be an indicator for where the wind is maybe shifting from the east to the north, and it might be quite a key moment for Nico and Paul. So if we have a look at what the routings are saying, so it kind of looks like there's a couple of options for these boats out here in the west. They can either try to keep pushing north and try and hope for a little bit of a wind shift to get round the corner of Brazil. But the longer they leave it, and if the wind doesn't shift, they're going to have to do a tack back with not a very good angle. Whereas Nico and Paul, who have been investing in the east, they're going to have a really nice angle, and they'll be able to sail nice and fast, probably in a foiling mode. The way to kind of decide which shift to be on might be based a bit on the diurnal variation of the trade winds. So we can see here the South Atlantic high pressure. During the daytime, it tends to expand a bit. There tends to be a little bit less pressure, and we can see it's got this more circular shape, whereas in the nighttime it becomes much more like an oval, and that really influences with the wind direction. You have a much more you can have a much more easterly direction depending on whereabouts you are in the high pressure, whereas in the daytime it can be a little bit more northerly. So this might influence when they choose to tack back and forth, and it can really make a big difference when the racing's so close at the moment. The other thing to look at is we can see how the routings are bringing them nice and close together, this east and west group, even though they've got 400 miles separation. The other thing that might influence their position is how they want to position themselves with the corner of Brazil. You can see here that the routings try to leave at least 50 miles gap between the land, and that's because you end up with the trade winds, you end up with a bit of divergence here, and you can end up with really light winds along the coast. So that's a good reason to be a little bit further offshore, but the closer you cut the corner, the less miles you have to sail. And something that might influence that is their strategy going the North Atlantic. We saw Charlie and Johan have been able to push quite east already, whereas Sebastian Simon is having to sail a little bit more to the west, a slightly longer course, and that's based on how they're going to pick up the depressions in the North Atlantic. So key moment for all these boats in 4th to 10th place at the moment, and it's going to be a really tight fight all the way to the finish.